Israel's prime minister, like we said, created a firestorm yesterday by suggesting that former Jerusalem Mufti Hajj Amin al-Husseini and not Hitler was responsible for the murder of 6 million Jews during the Holocaust. Netanyahu has since backtracked, saying that he did not absolve the Nazi regime of its crimes. I-24 News correspondent Ayman Siksik has the story.
Bibi absolves Hitler for the Holocaust. So reads the title of the lead story on the Daily Beast today, following the Israeli Prime Minister's controversial comment.
Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time. He wanted to expel the Jews.
Netanyahu said it was the former Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, who encouraged the Nazi dictator to kill Europe's Jews.
And Hajj Amin al-Husseini went to Hitler and said, if you expel them, they'll all come here. So what should I do with them? He asked. You said, burn them.
Reactions were quick to come in from all parties involved. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said that Netanyahu's comments exonerate Hitler, while blaming the Mufti for genocide, and accused the Israeli leader of fabricating history. And the German government also denounced Netanyahu's statement, assuming full responsibility for the Jewish Holocaust. But did the Israeli Prime Minister get his facts wrong? Not quite. In November 1941, the Mufti met with Adolf Hitler in Germany. Hitler told al-Husseini that the Nazi regime supported the Palestinian cause and rejected the idea of a Jewish national home. Whether al-Husseini directly asked for the extermination of Europe's Jews is unknown. But just 4 years later, in 1945, Yugoslavia sought to indict the Mufti as a war criminal for his role in recruiting 20,000 Muslim volunteers for the SS, who participated in the killing of Jews in Croatia and Hungary. But the Mufti fled to Cairo and later to Beirut and passed away in 1974. Netanyahu's comments raised concern for reasons other than the historical accuracy. Foremost is the potential to provoke anger towards Palestinians. At a time when incitement is at a peak, the premier's statement is especially significant. Netanyahu made the comments just hours before traveling to Germany to meet with Chancellor Angela Merkel, causing some commentators to wonder whether the timing was politically motivated. And timing, in fact, favors Netanyahu's argument. The final solution, a policy which saw the Nazi regime attempt to destroy European Jewry in its entirety, was announced in 1942, 1 year after Hitler and the Mufti met alone for the first time.
The horrors of the Holocaust are well documented, but to fully understand them, we have to remember two things. First, anti-Semitism in Europe didn't begin with the Nazis. The Nazis just built upon existing prejudice that had been around for centuries.
You, Aaron, can you lead us to this land of promise? You know where it is? Tell us. Where is it? Across the wilderness. And who's to lead us? You did that. Yeah. Where could I bring you except to Egypt? Where there is death? No, where there's food. Pharaoh would kill us all. Not if a god of Egypt went before us. You could make one for us, Aaron. No. Aaron knows the art of the temple. I will not. But we can't remain. Stay here. He will not. He would rather see our flesh rot in the wilderness. You will make a god for us. A god of gold. A golden calf. Shall be the high priest. Bring baskets, buckets, jewels, anything you have. Break off your earrings. Here, your bracelets, your necklaces. We will make us of a golden calf. The golden spoils we took from Egypt. There, against you, Moses. You take too much upon yourself. We will not live by your commandments. We're free.
There is no freedom without the law.
Whose law, Moses? Yours? Did you carve those tablets to become a prince over us?
Who is on the Lord's side? Let him come to me.
Jason and the people made me do.
Joshua! Joshua!
He showed you no land flowing with milk and honey. I show you a God of gold. Come with me. Follow me.
Blasphemers, idolaters, for this you shall drink bitter waters. God has set before you this day his laws of life and good and death and evil. Those who will not live by the law shall die by the law.
That's part of our faith. They had to read the Bible, the Torah. And that carried the Jewish people as a unique people of the book, as we called it. The people of the book not only knew the book, they could read the book. The capacity to ask questions, which is what the Talmudic tradition did across Jewish communities. It never defined the end of knowledge. It never put an exclamation mark on truth. It was constantly questioning, expanding, growing, exchanging between communities, between great scholars and their students. It never ended. It was always iterative. This culture exploded when the walls of the ghetto went down. This same tradition, this same culture is part of us. It's deeply ingrained in our culture, in our thinking, in our traditions.
Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples,
"The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must obey them and do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy loads and put them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for men to see. They make their phylacteries wide and the tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted in the marketplaces and to have men call them rabbi. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have only one master, and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth Father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called teachers, for you have one teacher, the Christ. The greatest among you will be your servant. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the kingdom of heaven in men's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert. And when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are. Woe to you, blind guides! You say if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath. You blind fools! Which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift on it, he is bound by his oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And he who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides! You strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee! First clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside also will be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You're like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of dead men's bones and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside, you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside, you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our forefathers, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. Fill up then the measure of the sin of your forefathers. You snakes! You brood of vipers! How will you escape being condemned to hell? Therefore, I am sending you prophets and wise men and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify. Others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town. And so, upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. I tell you the truth, all this will come upon this generation.
סיפורים חשובים, עובדות חשובות, שמעבירות דברים שלא קיבלנו בבית הספר, לא קיבלנו בתוכנית הלימודים, כשם שלא לימדו אותנו, גם בחינוך גבוה. נתתי הרצאות לפני מורות ומורים להיסטוריה. למה באמת היטלר היה נגד היהודים? מה הוא רצה מהם? מה הפריעו לו? אבל הדברים כתובים כאן במיין קאמפף. זה הספר יצא רק לאחרונה, התירו לתרגם מיין קאמפף בעברית, זה אסור כל השנים. אבל יש תרגום קודם יותר שיד ושם תרגם קטעים, להם היה מותר. היטלר טוען בספר שלו שהיהודים הם קומוניסטים. הם עשו את המהפכה ברוסיה. הם הרגו שם 30 מיליון רוסים, את כל האינטליגנציה, בצורה אכזרית ונוראה. ואת זה הם רוצים לעשות לכל העולם. הארץ הבאה בתור זה גרמניה. הם הקימו את המפלגה הקומוניסטית והסוציאליסטית הגרמנית, וזה נכון. אם אנחנו לא נתגבר עליהם עכשיו, הם יחסלו אותנו וישחטו גם כאן 20 מיליון איש את כל האינטליגנציה. וככה הם הלכו מארץ לארץ. כשבסופו של דבר האינטליגנטים היחידים, החכמים היחידים, יהיו רק היהודים. והוא חוזר על זה הרבה פעמים, שלא תהיה טעות. והוא צודק. את המהפכה ברוסיה עשו היהודים. את הצבא הרוסי בנה טרוצקי, שהיה גאון עצום. שונא ישראל שלא היה שני לו. הוא הקים את היפססט כהבריה, המחלקה היהודית של המפלגה הקומוניסטית, שחבריה הלשינו את האבא ואת האמא, את האח ואת הבן. מי שיש לו סידור או אפילו ספר ללימוד עברית, אני כבר לא מדבר על תפילין ומקווה, את הכל הוא הרס, גם אצל היהודים, אבל ודאי אצל הרוסים. בתמונה של פוליט ביורו הראשון, זה כמו הממשלה ברוסיה, מתוך 13 חברים, 6 יהודים. מי הקים את הקג"ב? לפני כן קראו לו אין כבודה. יהודים. אם כן, הדברים טובים מפורש. הוא לא שנא את היהודים בגלל שיש להם פאות. הוא לא שנא אותם בגלל שהם שומרים מצוות. בגלל שהם קומוניסטים. והוא כותב כאן בצורה ברורה. היהודים הרסו את הדת ואת האמונה. הם הפיצו בגרמניה את הכפירה באלוקים. כך הוא כותב. אני מרגיש שליחו של אלוקים לחסל את היהודים, כי הם כופרים בו. את זה הוא כותב כאן. אתם מבינים עכשיו למה הם לומדים את זה בבית ספר? כי מי כותב את תוכניות הלימודים? אותם שמאלנים. הם ודאי לא יכתבו שהיטלר רצה להרוג את היהודים בגלל שהם אבות השמאל העולמי ואבות המרקסיזם, קומוניזם, לניניזם. אבל את זה הוא כותב. הרסו את כל הערכים, הרעילו את כל הספרות והתיאטרון. מי זה אותם? יהודים שומרי תורה ומצוות הרעילו את התיאטרון הגרמני? מתוך 9 עיתונים גדולים בגרמניה, 7 היו של יהודים.
After the armistice, the guns went silent across Europe. But not in Berlin, where Germans were fighting Germans. News of the loss by the fatherland had come as a shock to Berliners, and now the old order was gone. In its place came chaos. The streets of what was once a quiet, conservative town became free fire zones. The nationalists of the extreme right battling it out with the communists of the extreme left. And out of this struggle emerged a new democratic state, the Weimar Republic. In the 20th century, after the First World War, the world's great metropolis of vice was Berlin. Berlin in the 1920s was the sex capital of Europe.
If you knew what to look for, you could find anything known to man in the sexual world was available on the streets of Berlin.
On any given night, as many as 100,000 prostitutes walked the streets or worked the sex clubs across the city.
There were all different whores with different kinds of makeup on the street. For instance, one was called Mutzi. Mutzis who were prostitutes who hung out on just one street, Mutzstrasse, and these were pregnant prostitutes. There were prostitutes who looked horrible, who had acid-scarred faces or hunchbacks or were lame or crippled. These were called grasshoppers. You had mother and daughter teams on one street that dressed exactly alike.
Here in Berlin, sex for sale offered every sort of perversion or fetishism imaginable. There was not a sexual appetite that could not be satisfied in this city.
There were clubs where lesbians liked to whip schoolboys, and you'd find military officers sitting there with children sitting on their laps. So a lot of it was play acting, but there were quite a lot of people who also indulged in it.
Berlin in the 1920s was the sex capital of Europe. Its very name became synonymous with perversion, debauchery, and creativity.
Places that you hadn't noticed would turn into outrageous strip clubs. The basements of the restaurants would be homosexual or lesbian romper rooms and sex clubs.
Every intellectual was leftish. The whole political right wing, which basically came from Munich, did not play any role in the beginning. The whole town was in the hands of leftish ideas.
But outside Berlin, the right-wing nationalist movement was attracting scores of disillusioned Germans, including one obscure Austrian corporal by the name of Adolf Hitler. Hitler, like many of the right-wingers, hated this new Berlin, a city bursting with Bolsheviks, socialists, revolutionaries, and Jews. But in the early 1920s, Berliners had more immediate concerns.
By 1922, inflation was spiraling wildly out of control. People would be paid in the morning and have suitcasefuls of banknotes, and they would have to then run to the shops because in the time between being paid and the time when they bought their goods, their food, the prices would have risen. Berlin was in a state of total chaos. Hundreds of thousands of dispossessed, starving in the streets, and at the same time, you had very rich people. So you got on the one hand the poor eating turnip soup, the butchers selling crows, squirrels, even rats, and on the other side, people who could afford it eating the most sumptuous meals like they never paused for thought.
With virtually every currency in the world more valuable than the German mark, foreign tourists flocked into the city to take advantage of the cheapest sex on the continent.
$10 in American money could buy you anything you wanted.
Every possible sexual taste was catered for.
Hausfraus became harlots. teenagers turned tricks, and Papa became a pimp.
When you have unemployed, you also have an increase in sex workers. But it wasn't just Berliners. It was tens and maybe hundreds of thousands of young boys and young girls who were coming to Berlin to participate in this hard currency sex traffic.
It was a city that was filled with lesbian life. There was the idea that everywhere you went, you didn't have to hide what you were.
When it came to sex, Marlene Dietrich could be omnivorous. As long as she found them attractive, she couldn't care less if her lover was a man or a woman.
Dietrich was an omnipotent sexual figure. She was an icon for gay women around the world at a time when there was no one else.
With this new anything-goes attitude, Berlin overnight replaced Paris as the center of hedonism.
That's why people saw Berlin as the Babylon of the 20s.
Things that had been considered to be immoral, amoral, whatever, became irrelevant, and anything went.
Drugs were readily available in Berlin. Every variety of drug, morphine, cocaine, opium. The morphine and the cocaine you could probably get prescribed by your local doctor or pharmacist. Opium was widely available, and also drugs were used in sexual science. Sexual scientists were very interested in the effects of, for instance, morphine would have on the orgasmic rate of a lesbian. So there was a complete scientific culture.
Berlin had become the center of sexual experimentation. It also became the center of scientific research into sex, led by a pioneering doctor.
And this was a very funny character called Papa, or the Einstein of sex in Berlin. It was Magnus Hirschfeld. Hirschfeld was a queer, Jewish, social democrat who really defined the liberal spirit of Berlin.
The crusading doctor for sexual freedom was also the founder of the world's first institute devoted to the scientific study of sex.
You could go and look at various fetish items. For example, he had these trousers that if you wore a trench coat, you could walk around Berlin. It looked like you had pants on because the lower parts of the trousers were there, but then you had nothing on above them, and you could flash this way. This was thought to be very titillating, very amusing. So it was this sort of thing you could see in the Institute for Sexual Research.
Unlike his fellow doctor in Vienna, Sigmund Freud, Hirschfeld advocated the radical notion that human sexuality could be studied without imposing moral judgments.
Hirschfeld's also credited with operations and surgeries of sex change and sexual rejuvenation. He had a clinic for people to be consulted about sexual problems.
But Berlin's reputation as a hotbed for the new and risque was not just limited to its bars and bedrooms. They also streamed into the city streets and clubs of Berlin. From all across Europe, artists, writers, and intellectuals with homosexual leanings were drawn to this metropolis.
Berlin was unquestionably the most open gay city in the world. It attracted first W.W.I. Auden, the great British poet, and then his friend Christopher Isherwood. Auden came first, was interested in the gay scene there, and talked about Berlin being a bugger's paradise.
Christopher Isherwood, fed up with Cambridge and an England openly hostile to homosexuals, chose to move to Berlin. His novels about the wild side of life in the city and its cabarets were eventually turned into a hugely successful stage play and movie.
There were about 160 completely different lesbian and gay male nightclubs and lounges.
Unlike most cities, with their one red light district, Berlin's erotic clubs were scattered throughout the vast metropolis. Bizarre sexual fantasies of domination were turned into works of art, while they would indulge in a wide variety of strange sexual experiments involving violence and death, all in the name of art. In 1928, a Nazi propaganda sheet denounced Berlin as a melting pot of everything that is evil.
When Goebbels got off the train in 1926 to take over the city, he found the Nazis could scrape together maybe 200 members. And the communists at that point had about 250,000. And they didn't particularly take to a group of people who came in from outside and said that everything that the city had stood for was all of a sudden to be abandoned or to be considered decadent or to be pushed aside.
Hitler had personally appointed him to go to Berlin. It looked at the time like an impossible mission.
He was a good choice for the Nazis because he understood the city. It was he who was designated to turn the city from a bastion of communism, a red city, into a brown one, that is a bastion of the Nazis. This was a difficult proposition. Berlin, to them, was foreign territory. They shared the typical provincial conservative Germans' notion about Berlin as a decadent place. It was too avant-garde. They hated the place.
Berlin was in an upheaval. Street fights were common. Unemployment was worsening. And then, on January 30th, 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. He made it clear what his plans for the city were. What is ugly in Berlin, we shall remove.
What happened in '33, especially, was that the gay Berlin dive bars started to be raided. Those things were allowed to kind of exist under the radar for up until 1933, really. The Nazi police started paying attention to the dive bars. They were harassing the customers. They were closing them down. You might get arrested.
The El Dorado, home to some of the most famous transvestites in the city, was taken over and turned into Nazi headquarters.
Goebbels sang out the name of every book as it was consigned to the flames, legend has it.
The exodus was almost immediate. Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill, George Gross, Albert Einstein, Marlene Dietrich, just a small number of the thousands who were driven into exile. Berlin, for a short 14 years, had been a crucible of history, brimming with a volatile mix of sex, arts, and politics, laced with disillusionment and spiked with decadence. The Babylon on the River Spree was no more.
Starting here locally in Tel Aviv, where Pride celebrations are well underway, and over 100,000 revelers are expected to be parading through Tel Aviv streets en route to Tel Aviv's Hayarkon Park. Nearly 3 decades since the advent of the annual Pride Parade, the festivities are in full swing. And right in the middle of all of it is our very own Natasha Kurchuk, who is joining us live, celebrating and having fun in the heat and all. Hello, Natasha.
Hello. It is hot out here. It is steamy, but there are thousands, tens of thousands of people who are here in Tel Aviv for the annual Gay Pride Parade, and they've come here from across the globe. That's right. We have somebody from Germany right here, and you've got to meet a very special drag queen named Shiggy, who has been making the rounds. Tell us where you're from, Shiggy.
Hello. I'm from Gran Canaria, Canary Islands, Spain.
In Spain?
Yeah.
So tell us why you decided to come here.
We are doing a collaboration between Israel and Gran Canaria, and we are doing a promotion because we want to have people from here, because Gran Canaria is a very good destination, and it's a super gay-friendly island, so it's a good idea to go there.
You want to show people what you've got, and you want to see what we've got. So tell us a little bit about what your experience has been like here in Israel for the first time. It's known for having one of the most famous gay pride parades in the world. Is it what you expected?
Yeah, it's better. It's better than I expected. And this is very, very safe and very sure. I feel like very comfortable here, very accepted. So yeah, Tel Aviv people is like super open-minded. Yeah.
Would you recommend other people from the LGBTQ community to come here and see this? Can you not do that? Thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course. This is an amazing gay pride, so everybody should come here.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chigi. So much. Look at this. I mean, really, she's stealing the show. We had to fight to get an interview with her. But I want to tell you just a little bit about the events that are taking place today. This parade is going to be lasting. This parade is going to be lasting from 12 p.m. until 5 p.m. It's going to end in a massive, massive concert celebration with Israeli celebrities, drag queens just like this. And of course, there are a series of events after this. There will be parties. There are going to be picnics for gay families. You're going to see informational talks about LGBTQ rights and policies here in the state of Israel, and also programs to help integrate LGBTQ youth into the military.
Well, Natasha, I know a lot of people getting very excited and wanting to be on television. Way to keep it together.
Oh, yes.
Tell us why Tel Aviv is considered the gay capital of the Middle East.
All right. I mean, there's so many reasons, but you just have to start with the population. Understand that an estimated 25% of the people living here in Tel Aviv identify as LGBTQ. So you have a population here of about 400,000 people living in Tel Aviv. That's over 100,000 members of the LGBTQ community. And this is really, Tel Aviv is truly considered a safe haven. In fact, one of the most recent policies that was passed here in Tel Aviv was the allowance of same-sex couples to register their marriage in Tel Aviv specifically. What that means is they get the same civil rights as heterosexual couples if they register their marriage here in Tel Aviv. That's not the same in other parts of the country, unfortunately, but it just goes to show, how open and really, progressive Tel Aviv is in terms of a center for the LGBTQ community.
Thank you very much, Natasha, and have fun out there and go get some water.
Absolutely.
As we heard, there are people in Sweden who support Israel and have a deep sense of the injustice of the present situation. It's these people who give hope to those who still believe that things will get better here. One of them is Barbara Spector, a former American who made Aliyah and then 10 years ago, with the help of the government of Sweden, set up a non-denominational institute of Jewish learning with the Greek name of Paideia here in Stockholm. She believes the current wave of anti-Semitism in Sweden will pass and that Jews have an important role to play in a country undergoing profound change.
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
And now, as we conclude the largest anti-racist conference of all time, we have a surprising guest that would like to make a statement to us about his struggle to come to terms with tolerance and diversity.
Went back in the 1930s. I have been in Argentina thinking things over, and I should have done things differently. These days I am a changed man, and this is the dawning of a new day. I am now an avowed anti-racist, and we are going to crush racism once and for all.
This is amazing! I can see the headlines now.
Adolf Hitler is an anti-racist. This could end racism for good.
Ah, Tel Aviv, what a great city. But I see there is work to be done here.
What do you mean, Hitler?
Too many Jews here. We need more diversity. Thanks to my new anti-racist organization, we are going to spice things up a bit. Diversity is good. Diversity is a strength. Diversity is what makes the Middle East so peaceful.
So you are not a Nazi anymore?
Oh no, quite the contrary actually. My anti-racist organization is lobbying for an open border policy for Israel. Non-Jews have just as much of a right to be here as anyone else. You cannot restrict the country to a specific group of people. That's racist.
Many people would think it's ironic that you of all people would end up leading anti-racism in Israel. Why did you choose this country?
Israel is a rich country. Only a racist would oppose non-Jewish immigration. Israel has not yet learned how to be multicultural. My organization is going to be part of the process of that transformation, which must take place. Israel is not going to be the monolithic society it once was. I'm going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Israel to make. We are going into a multicultural mode. I might be resented because of my leading role. But without that leading role, and without that transformation, Israel will not survive.
I hate racists and people who oppose this wonderful development. It won't be easy, but Israel will be multicultural. And we're benefiting financially and culturally from immigration. An open border policy is a good thing for any country. I'm proud to say that I support diversity and multiculturalism.
But the Jewish people have a right to exist as a unique people.
Ah, that's racist.
No, I'm not racist, but...
Well, I thought I heard you say you want to preserve your people.
Yeah, I think we have a right to preserve our culture and our people.
Ah, that is racist. So you believe you are God's chosen people? Some kind of master race? That just reminds me of the brown shirts in the 30s.
I'm not racist, but if this process continues, we'll be a minority in our own country.
Stop whining. Go and have more Jewish babies if you are so concerned.
Hold on, Hitler. Israel is being overrun with non-Jews because of your open border policy. It won't matter how many babies we have. We will still be a minority in our own country. Your policies will have destroyed us.
You Jews need to lighten up. Multiculturalism is great. Look at all the wonderful new restaurants you have to eat at now. Diversity is good. Diversity is a strength. Diversity is what makes the Middle East so peaceful. And diversity is saving Israel.
Hitler, is this your new rainbow dating organization?
Of course. These days I'm all about the love.
You're just the same old Hitler, an anti-Semite trying to erase the Jews.
That's nonsense. How can love be anti-Semitic?
But you are only supporting Jews dating non-Jews. In fact, you are encouraging this. This multiculturalism and diversity agenda of yours seems to be just a scam to get rid of us for good.
Well, we could mix Asians and Arabs too. Would that make you happy? You are just a jealous racist who can't get a Jewish girlfriend.
No, I am not jealous of anyone. I just believe this is some agenda to get rid of us. You may be for mixing other cultures, but your policies will still lead to a world without Jews. That's genocide.
Little Zionist, take off your tinfoil hat. You have been reading too many conspiracy websites. Jews all over the world love diversity and multiculturalism. Because I love you, I have given it one more try. We heal the world, we are the children of the rainbow. We heal the world, we are the children of the dream.
No, Hitler. Many Jews don't like what's happening, the Jewish people being replaced through immigration.
Jews should just embrace their multicultural future. There is no room on this planet for racism.
Wait, Hitler, you never answered the question. What you're doing is genocide, is it not?
Nonsense. This is natural. People migrate and fall in love. Religions come and go. I would not burden myself worrying over all this.
Look around, Hitler. Everything's non-Jewish now. You have forced a genocidal scheme on us.
I am not forcing anything. I have not killed anyone this time. Remember, I am now an anti-racist. I don't believe borders should stand in the way of people and culture. Diversity is good. Diversity is a strength. Diversity is what makes the Middle East so peaceful. And diversity has saved Israel!
Oh, God! Look, Hitler, we told you that your policy would make Israel non-Jewish. And I'm the only Jew left. You wiped us out for good.
Well, no one could have foreseen that.
I think that people don't really understand the mentality that we're dealing with. I think they don't really understand who, if you can call them people, who they really are. Whether you like Jews, you don't like Jews, you think Zionists are evil, bandying around these tired expressions, you have to understand what's going on here in Israel is going to... I've always said this, but now it's clearer than ever that it will determine the fate of all humanity. And you know what else, Jim? I just want to say this to our Christian friends, you know, just to call it as it is and say it straight out, you know, you guys are worshiping one Jew. That's a mistake. You should be worshiping every single one of us because we all die for your sins every single day. And that's exactly what's going on here. Yeah. We're all God's firstborn, and we're dying for your sins right now because the Jewish people in the land of Israel are the bulwark against the orcs. Mm-hmm. Okay? The orcs are coming not to a theater near you, but to your home.
Hi there, I'm Sean Green, and I'm the guy that tracks hate speech online. You've probably been hearing about a huge uptick in hate speech recently, and I'm the guy that tracks it on behalf of the ADL and the Center for Countering Digital Hate. My job is a very difficult one, but it's one that's very necessary and rewarding. I scan X, formerly known as Twitter, all day looking for hate speech in order for people to understand how bad it really is right now. And it's not an easy job, let me tell you that. Besides having to expose myself to so much hate, it's really just a mentally challenging job. People all the time are saying I'm mentally challenged, and when it comes to my work, I could not agree more. Take this tweet, for example. Those big-nosed, funny-dressed people are a cancer on society. So this one is actually not exactly clear who the hate speech is being directed at. So what I will do is I will put one check for anti-Semitism and one for anti-black racism just to be safe, as obviously this can be interpreted either way. Here's another example of how difficult this job is. Check out this video that was posted to X yesterday.
Niggers are dirty, filthy.
First 2 seconds, no real issue here. Black on black, totally allowable. Let's play it a few more seconds though.
Usually they're kite.
And there you have it. And again, this is not an easy job because you think, hey, that's anti-black racism, but it's coming from a black person, so technically we won't count that. So what I will do is I will just count that as a single instance of anti-Semitism coming from her, and then add up all the anti-Semitism in the comments, the retweets, and the likes, which comes to a grand total of 117 anti-Semitisms. And now here's another difficult example that I face on a near daily basis. Now just look how awful this is. Correct, right there, yup, you see it. Did you see it? Yup, I bet you did. See, right there, it says, I hate Asian and Indian people, especially the gay ones. Now that's actually 5 different instances of hate speech. That would be homophobia, anti-Indian, anti-Asian, anti-Asian homophobia, and anti-Indian homophobia. Any mention of transgender people, we just instantly say that's hate speech as well, regardless of who's saying it or what the context is, as just the mere act of discussing transgender people's identities is hate speech. Islamophobia is also a very huge problem recently with many, many new occurrences, and we've actually found a new example of Islamophobia that I'd like to share with you. A lot of people online in the past 48 hours have discovered Osama bin Laden's letter to America, which outlines his reasons for committing the terrorist attacks on 9/11, and many people have begun sympathizing with him. This sympathy for him and his cause is then causing a lot of other people on the internet to make fun of those people who are sympathizing with Osama bin Laden, which is a clear-cut case of Islamophobia. So hopefully you learned something today about hate speech and how it's not appropriate to use it online, but rather only while driving.
The Nazis actually had experimented with other ways to remove Jews from Europe early on. These policies are known as the territorial solution to the Jewish question. Basically, the Nazis felt that it would be easier to forcibly relocate Jews. It was only when these solutions failed that they decided there was one final solution left. Since anti-Semitic phobia was part of how the Nazis claimed legitimacy, they began implementing their solutions early on. In 1939, Nazi authorities established segregated neighborhoods called ghettos in Poland, forcing Jewish residents to remain concentrated within them. Again, this was nothing new. The forced segregation of Jews had been a European practice for centuries. Soon, however, the Nazis took the first step beyond ghettos and towards their territorial solution. In late 1939, Hitler approved a plan to establish a segregated Jewish state called the Lublin Reservation. Basically, according to this plan, Jews from across the region would be forcibly relocated to this reservation, where they could be utilized as a labor force by the Nazi military. On October 18th, the first transports arrived from Bohemia and Moravia. This forced relocation both segregated Jews from Aryan Europeans and left their properties abandoned. The Nazis began planning a resettlement of Germans into the formerly Jewish farms, factories, and houses. The Lublin Reservation was one option in the territorial solution, but there was also another idea that had been debated among anti-Semites in Europe for years. What if, instead of segregating the Jews, they were simply removed from the continent? By mid-1940, the Nazis had envisioned a way to implement this policy. It was known as the Madagascar Plan. Here's how this worked. In June of 1940, the Nazis occupied France. They took control of the French government and claimed authority over its colonies and territories as well. This included the French colony of Madagascar, an African island in the Indian Ocean. The Madagascar Plan was similar to the Lublin Reservation in that it also began with the creation of a Jewish state under SS administration. However, in this case, the goal wasn't to segregate Jews within Europe. The goal was to forcibly remove them from Europe and resettle them in Madagascar. Hitler approved the Madagascar Plan in August of 1940, and the Nazis began preparing the infrastructure to transport 4 million Jews to the island. at a rate of 1 million per year. In 1940, the Nazis believed they would resolve their Jewish question through the territorial solution of forced resettlement. By 1941, however, it was clear that territorial solutions would not work. Why not? By the end of 1940, the Lublin Reservation was already overwhelmed by logistical issues.
Near mid-September, it was found necessary to reopen military operations in Madagascar. From Majunga come these pictures of our landing there. The rapid transport of this newsreel record from about 8,000 miles away is a tribute to our air and sea communications. Units of United Kingdom regiments were among the landing force of Empire troops which rapidly penetrated into the island. Resistance was in the main confined to road obstructions. It became increasingly apparent that the population was barely lukewarm to the Vichy demands for armed opposition. In fact, these scenes speak for themselves. The half-hearted resistance by the garrison troops made the operation all the more gratifying. General Sir William Platt, one of the liberators of Ethiopia, seen here on the left, soon made it abundantly clear that this is a precautionary measure to secure Madagascar from Axis domination.
The gas chamber allegation, in regards to the Jewish Holocaust, is perhaps the hardest to believe. Auschwitz concentration camp, which is said to have consisted of work camps and death camps. The general belief being pushed is that from 1940 to 1945, Auschwitz-Birkenau went on to become a major site of what is being called the Nazi final solution to the Jewish question. It is said that large-scale gas chambers designed for mass killing were used by Nazi Germany as part of their alleged genocide program. The chemical being used in these gas chambers for the purpose of killing is said to have been Zyklon B. From here, the corpses are said to have been taken to the crematorium for the cremation process, in which the corpses would be burned and discarded of. It is said that 1.2 million Jews went through this gassing and burning process at Auschwitz. This is what Holocaust academics are calling the official story.
And after that, you know, when after 15-20 minutes they open up the thing, the first thing I saw the people I saw 15 minutes before alive. I saw the mothers with the children standing up because the gas chamber will take maybe 500 people. It used to make 2,500 people. Everybody standing up. There was no room for anything else but standing up.
On a football field, the Auschwitz gas chamber would be this size, with that little flashy white line being the door. To see how crowded it would be, we'll have this be a head and these be shoulders. We make one row of 14 people, across 23 feet, and bring it up into the gas chamber. That is how crowded the gas chamber would be, with only 1,680 persons.
Did you have any contact with the people being brought in? Were you able to talk to them? Did they
From
talk
time
to you?
From time to time, we were telling them, you know, just in a very few words, you know, that they are going to die.
This density implies no resistance at all. It implies total cooperation. It's hard to believe that this many people would go in there without resistance, because it's a little under 1 square foot per person, which might make people a little skeptical about the shower story, especially since there were no soap dispensers. This density would require military discipline and training.
While you were doing this, who was overseeing all of this? Who was there that was in
The
charge?
capos on the crematorium.
A capo is a Jewish worker put in charge.
While you were doing this, who was overseeing all of this? Who was there that was in
The
charge?
capos on the crematorium. You know, we had only 1 or 2 guards there. It wasn't too many SS. They're always outside the crematorium. Every 3-4 hours there's, you know, about half a dozen well-equipped, you know, SS just moving around. But inside the crematorium were only a couple of SS, 2-3 SS. The capos were doing the job. The job they had.
It's hard to believe that they could get 2,000 people to move all the way to the back so tightly, especially since we are led to believe that Jews were running the operation.
But inside the crematorium were only a couple of SS, 2-3 SS.
This level of crowding would take complete compliance and lots of practice. At some point during the gassing operation, people would probably panic or cause a revolt and surge toward the door. How hard could they push? How hard could 2,000 people push on this door, and what kind of door was used? To find out, we go to the US Holocaust Memorial website, and look up gassing operations, and scroll down to further reading, to find the author Jean-Claude Pressac, in his book, Auschwitz, Technique and Operation of the Gas Chambers. We find numerous photos of the types of doors being used, which were made from flimsy timber. Do you choose to believe that 1.2 million people, systematically, in overcrowded lots of 2,000, were complicit in their own deaths, as to not resist? Not even once? Jean-Claude's book has a photo of the elevator as well, the elevator which was apparently used to take the corpses from the gassing room to the crematorium upstairs. However, it seems that the elevator had a maximum capacity of 300 kilos. So, the bodies would apparently go on here. This is a triangular bar, with a stabilizing piece of wood here. With 2,000 bodies in the basement and a capacity of 300 kilos, it would take 280 trips up and down, 7 bodies at a time. This goes to show that the needed time frame to kill all of these Jews could never have been met, because discarding of the bodies would have been too time-consuming. The exact number of victims at Auschwitz is difficult to fix with certainty, as many prisoners were never registered and much evidence was destroyed by the SS in the final days of the war. However, shortly following the camp's takeover, the Soviet government stated that 4 million people had been killed on the site, a figure now regarded as greatly exaggerated, even by the Jewish community. However, the figure that was accepted by the Jewish community was from unproven claims made by Dr. William Hertel, as mentioned earlier, that 2.5 million Jews had been killed in gas chambers and about 500,000 had died of other causes. Later he wrote, "I regard 2.5 million far too high. Even Auschwitz had limits to its destructive possibilities." Essentially, he was going back on claims made during the Nuremberg trials. Raoul Hilberg's 1961 work, The Destruction of the European Jews, estimated the number killed at Auschwitz as a maximum of 1 million Jewish victims. As you can see, the more and more people have looked into the mathematics regarding these mass killings, the smaller the numbers have gotten over time. The point being is, there is no official number of Jews killed at Auschwitz, let alone during World War II. There are just different official numbers used by different groups of people. This much is fact. However, claiming such things usually results in ridicule, persecution and hollow claims of anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. Any attempts of revision or historical fact-checking of these events also result in similar criticisms. The cremation process is perhaps the most unbelievable part of the operation. 15 individual crematoriums were in Auschwitz, which may seem like a lot, but given the capabilities of these small and flimsy ovens, there is just no possible way there would have been an ability to dispose of 2,000 bodies at a time. It takes just over an hour to cremate a body, using the crematoriums we have today, which burn at a lot higher temperature. In fact, to put it into perspective, it would have taken a week to dispose of all the bodies properly, which puts the Auschwitz gas chamber story into question, because their belief that 2,500 bodies were killed and disposed of at a time is the only way to make the mathematics work. Let's look at it like this. In hour 1, 2,000 Jews are stripped, gassed and killed. In hour number 2, 15 Jews are cremated, with 1,985 left to go. In hour number 3, 15 more are cremated, with 1,970 left to go. And at this snail's pace, by hour 133, or 6 days later, you still have 5 left to go. So you can't do another gassing until the 6th day, because there is nowhere to put the bodies. The main point here is, the Germans would never have had a system, with a ratio like this, where the cremation holds up the killing process by almost a week. Another way to look at it. The 15 ovens take about a row of bodies in an hour. But look at how many rows you have left. How does the capo make the story work?
So after taking the bodies out of the gas chamber and putting them on these elevators, then what would happen?
You go to you put them in the ovens.
Who would put them in the ovens?
There are 2 other people, that put in stretchers. 3, 4 of them in stretchers and put them in the oven.
He tries to make it work by claiming that 3 or 4 bodies are put in an opening at a time.
How many people were you able to actually put inside of each oven?
You put about 4.
How else does he make it work?
And how long, again, would it take to burn?
20 to 30 minutes.
So after...
He makes the story work by saying it takes 20 to 30 minutes to cremate 3 to 4 bodies. Whereas we said, it takes about 1 hour for 1 body, with a much better quality furnace. This is an impossibility. Regardless of how light in weight the inmates may have been. Because stacking the bodies on top of each other would have also affected the burning rate. As a body is over 60% water, the machines just would not have functioned properly and it would have taken around 4 hours to burn 4 bodies. Also, he lies about the cremation rate, to obscure the fact that 15 ovens isn't enough to handle 2,000 bodies. And when that's established, surely the number 1 to 1.2 million can't be accurate either. What makes it even more unbelievable is that Holocaust historians tell us that the crematoriums were not in use until mid-1943, ending in late 1944, which means there was only a year and a half for all of these bodies to go through the process. This is Dr. Carlo Mantonio. In his book, entitled Auschwitz, A Case for Sanity, he shows how 3 to 4 bodies would not have fit in that opening. And the vaporizing water, about 360 liters, for 12 bodies, would overwhelm the oven, bringing the temperature down too much for it to function as fast as it normally would. Here is Crematorium 2, from the air. So, if this building was not a gas chamber facility, for the purpose of mass murder, what was it for? We find Crematorium 2, in satellite view. We find it on the edge of this community, because it's made for the people who die here. We will get into the specifics of the main causes of death soon, but for now, we will focus on the purpose of the facility. We know the setting for Auschwitz was made in the theme of a community, which had some very unusual facilities within, ones which were available for prisoners. Like a swimming pool, a theatre for the orchestra and plays. In fact, they even had a maternity ward, a camp library, an art studio, a brothel, a religious facility, a sauna, a soccer field, and more. This is all fact which is backed up by the Holocaust Museum itself. One might be inclined to ask, why would they build facilities like this for prisoners in a death camp? Or better yet, why would they put the gas chamber and crematorium next to the hospital? Yet again, the answer is simple. Historical documents tell us that almost all prisoners went to the gas chamber on arrival, which would defeat the purpose of housing them, let alone giving them swimming pools and a soccer field. The reason is, because it was not a death camp, it was a work camp. The gas chamber being used was not for the purpose of genocide, but for the purpose of delousing. Dr. Charles Larson, a highly regarded U.S. pathologist, who was appointed by the Judge Advocate General's Department to investigate the conditions and the cause of deaths in the camps, concluded after overseeing thousands of autopsies that not one case of death by poison gas was found. The chief cause of death in German labor camps, as found by Dr. Charles Larson, was typhus, because, as quoted, typhus was a widespread problem and a serious health threat during World War II. German engineers and chemists were commissioned to develop the means to counter the typhus epidemic and minimize the loss of life. Evidence provided by Dr. Charles Larson was deliberately ignored by the Nuremberg court. Typhus is any of several similar diseases caused by Rickettsia bacteria. The name comes from the Greek word typhos, meaning smoky or hazy, describing the state of mind of those affected with typhus. The causative organism Rickettsia is an obligate intracellular parasitic bacterium that cannot survive for long outside living cells. Typhus should not be confused with typhoid fever. While typhoid means typhus-like, the diseases are distinct and are caused by different genera of bacteria. Zyklon B was used to disinfect the clothing of the prisoners in an attempt to prevent typhus, which is spread by body lice. There was a huge epidemic of typhus at Auschwitz, and what actually happened was that procedures aimed at holding various diseases in check broke down under the pressures of war. The typhus epidemics that raged through the camps, in both the First and Second World Wars, killed many thousands. If you suffer from typhus, your body wastes away and you look as if you are starving to death. Typhus is the more logical reason for most of the severely emaciated prisoners and corpses. At the western end of the crematorium building, which houses the so-called gas chamber disguised as a shower room, one can today see and walk through 4 delousing chambers which were used to fumigate clothing. The only explanation regarding these chambers is a sign above them, also in 5 languages, which simply says fumigation cubicles in English, and Desinfektionskammern in German. Eventually, typhus spread to the concentration camps in Germany in December 1944, and this caused many deaths in the last months of the war, particularly in the Bergen-Belsen camp where 35,000 prisoners died in only 2 months' time. Half of all the deaths in the Dachau concentration camp were in the last 6 months of the war, when a typhus epidemic was out of control there. One method that was used to end the typhus epidemics at Auschwitz-Birkenau was the gassing of the sick prisoners. On August 29, 1942, there were 746 prisoners from the Birkenau camp hospital who were gassed. Teschenstäbeno was founded in 1924 in Hamburg. In 1925 the firm became the only distributor of Zyklon B for the region. On the 3rd of September, 1945, the 2 owners of the company were tried before a British military court. It was argued that the supply of Zyklon B exceeded what was needed for the purpose of delousing, therefore, they must have known all about the gas chambers. In 1946, both men were convicted and hung to death.
The first Holocaust